Well, we have a quorum now, and we're only a couple minutes by my phone past 6:30, so we'll call this meeting to order. And I better get my packet out. That would have helped. And we'll ask for a roll call, please.
Patterson, Petrie,
Present.
Furtado, Goss,
Yes.
King. Here. Marsh. Here. Esri.
Present. We do have a quorum, as I mentioned earlier. Move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Is there such a moved by Mr. Goss?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Petrie. Any additions or corrections anybody cares to make? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. We have then the approval of minutes from the ELEC committee meeting September 7th, 2017.
So moved.
Moved to approve by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. King. Any additions, corrections to those? As printed in the handout, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you. That's approved. Move on to public participation. Just make a note that we ask that you generally keep your comments to about 5 minutes per person. And if you would, please, when you first come up, state your name and your address for the record. First person I have here is Mr. Michael Van Pelt. And the microphone's already on.
Where do you want me, right here?
Yes, please. And also, if you'd just be sure to speak into the microphone, since it is broadcast live, and also there's just a video record of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, board, thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Michael Van Pelt. I recently bought a house on 2424 East Green Street. My neighborhood is in trouble. I want to know what I can do to help my neighborhood. I have some pictures here that I would like to share with you. I'm more or less looking for your guidance and what's on the books, what laws that we can get enforced to get our neighborhood cleaned up, to make it a safe environment to live, to protect our property values, to protect our children. We need to get the traffic slowed down on Scottswood Drive. They run through there. They use that as a shortcut. All the children catch the bus there on Scottswood. I need some help either getting some speed limit signs in there. Preferably, we'd like to get some speed bumps. And we have a number of properties that need to be addressed. When you look at these pictures, I ask you to please.
You need to stay by the microphone or you won't be recorded.
When you look at these pictures, I want you guys to ask yourself, what would you do if this was your neighbor? How would you like to live next to that school bus full of trash and junk? How would you like to have trash in your neighbor's yard that blows over in your yard? How would you like to have a junk vehicle parked out in front of your house that the windows have all been shot out of? I called the sheriff's department a number of times. They come out, told me they couldn't do anything about it. I finally came here, got the address, and found out who owned that property. Called the owner. He happens to own a car company, sells cars. He had a wrecker. I had to call him 3 or 4 times, but he finally came out and pulled that car and got that car cleaned up out of our neighborhood. If you came into my neighborhood, would you want to buy a house in this neighborhood? We got trash. We just need to know what to do. How can we get our neighborhood cleaned up? Are there rules on the books that we can get enforced? What direction we go? Who do we need to talk to? What do we need to do? Yvonne Sadler has lived in the neighborhood all her life. She's raised 6 children. She called a meeting together and there was 11 neighbors who came there. So we have a good base. We have a lot of good people who live in our neighborhood. It's lived in our neighborhood for years. And they see that their property values are going down. And I just ask you guys, we're here looking for your help and your guidance. Tell us what we can do to get this cleaned up. My shared a story. My Uncle Harry is a retired executive from Aflac Insurance. I was complaining to Uncle Harry about the weeds out in front of Scottsdale when you turn into our station. And I quote, "Get off your, and do something about it." So I took my mower and I go out there and now I keep it mowed. In the spring, we're going to put a flower bed there and plant some flowers. We've got a good group behind us. We want to get our neighborhood cleaned up, but we're going to need your guys' help and in your direction, and tell us what we can do, what the rules are, and how do we get involved, and who do we need to speak to. We've got an excellent article coming out in the paper this Sunday. The lady from the News Gazette came out and interviewed, took some pictures of our neighborhood. It'll be out in this Sunday's paper. And the slant of the article that we wanted was, we are concerned, what can we do to help in our neighborhood? And I would really appreciate your guys' guidance. I don't want to be, I talked to the lady here in the office, has been very helpful. And I explained to her, the last thing I want to do is be a problem. I don't want to cause a problem or be a pain in the rear end. But I'm like a dog with a bone. I've got that bone and I'm not letting go. We're going to get our neighborhood cleaned up. And I would need your guys' help. Thank you so much. Yvonne, do you have anything to say or add to?
She's next. I have, Yvonne Sadler. Yeah, if you would care to come forward and speak into the microphone, please.
Yvonne Sadler, 2410 East Illinois, in Scottswood. Now, my viewpoint's a little different than his. He hasn't been here. We did this 5 years ago. I took pictures, went and turned them into Jamie and everything. Of course, she's the only one that takes care of all of them. She told me she has 600 now. And my pal that I brought in, nothing was done. All that time. We made pamphlets. We did pamphlets, told the neighbors who mowed the yards nicely, how they could haul away stuff free. We mowed yards. We called the landlords and had trash removed. Now, this went on for about a year. Nothing was done on the part of the county. We got no support. We were told there was nothing to do. The cars, we wanted pulled out. Prather, that, supervisor of the road, he said the state's attorney said she didn't want to be bothered with that. So we have no cars that was ever removed. So they're accumulating, and they aren't even on there. I didn't take pictures this time of all the cars. There's so much more important things. That bus scene has been there for over 5 years. I pleaded with them to do something. She says, well, the state's attorney has to be interested. I don't care if they're not interested. It's their job. So we do need help. Now, we never did the board, never came before you guys. But finally, my husband got sick. He's sick for over 3 years. And another gal that I was helping me, we went around and picked up the streets weekly and made it clear around the neighborhood over and over and over again. Nothing was done to help us. We received no support. And I'm pleading with you to do something for us. It would be really nice if you would, the rules and regulations could be mirrored on Urbana's ordinances or Champaign ordinances. And we need to be more progressive. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for hearing me. And please, oh yes, and Mr. Harper never bothered to get back to us.
Thank you.
And that's our representatives. Mr. Ezra, he did comment back. And I want to thank him for at least commenting.
Thank you. Then we have Ms. Betty Rowell. Okay. if you care to speak.
Good evening once again. Thank you for making me feel welcome. This is my first visit before the county board, the ULUC. Is that correct? That acronym? I've just been learning what that means. I am a resident at 406 South Dodson Drive. And I'm very grateful that Mike and Yvonne asked me to just present my perspective. I live next to an abandoned property at 404 South Dodson. My neighbor was kind enough, if you will, to leave the property in disarray, unmowed, unattended by now. There is garbage from other residents that has been stored there in the form of mattresses. I believe there are a dozen. I have taken time to clean much of the debris that has been left by passerbyers, and it's quite disconcerting to have to reside. I mean, I've invested in my property, I pay taxes, but I'm not getting a return on my dollar. I try to be a model citizen in terms of caring for my property. If you pass by occasionally, I would encourage you to do so. Drive through the neighborhood. The pictures are wonderful, but reality is real. And you can only understand our concern if you see it with the naked eye. I promise you, it is an apple. I would like to be more proactive in our approach and think about what we can do relative to informing individuals. I've been at 406 South Dodson for 15 years, and I would like to think that I could have a current certified copy of the guidelines, the covenant, the ordinances which apply to the Scottswood districts. I'm in District 3, I believe, and that would be helpful to me, a certified copy, meaning that every single resident would be informed as to their rights. I love the brochure. It's outdated, I'm certain, in some ways, that has been provided by the Emergency Services and Neighborhood Watch Guide, where the numbers outline the names of the offices and the phone numbers. I think that every homeowner, every landlord, and any landlord that has current and future tenants should be obligated to inform their tenants as to these numbers that are available to them so they can exercise their rights as citizens. Homeowners can exercise their rights to be informed and to notify in the event that there is a need. So if we could be proactive together, make certain that a packet is mailed, delivered to the homes, and abided by. Deadlines are set as to when the guidelines should be instituted relative to how long can a house be abandoned? How long can a burned property stand without being given due diligence and attention? I'm willing to do what I need to do to be a model in the community. I would like you to address our concerns and respect the fact that we want to live in the same type of neighborhood that I'm certain that most of you live in. I'm not willing to flee. I'm not running. I'm willing to get my hands dirty too. I'm willing to serve. I'd like to work with you. I'd like you to honor my request to work with me and my neighbors.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll then move on to communications. Are there any communications for this board from any of the members? Ms. Petrie?
Well, this is not a communication per se, and you may call me out of order if you think it is. Since we can't have exchange because of our board rules with people who come before us during public participation, I do hope that you will feel free to not only directly contact your county board member in your district, but other county board members to talk to them about further about some of the ideas that you presented this evening. And we all always work very closely with Mr. Hall, who is sitting here on solving these problems, which are difficult problems to solve, and some of them are within the county's domain to solve, and then some of them are within the domain of other entities of which we can make connections or build bridges and things like that. So I just wanted to convey that. You've taken time to come this evening, which we appreciate very much, and didn't want to have you all leave that with the impression that we're not listening. We are listening.
Thank you, Patsy. Any further communications? Mr. Marsh?
Attended a meeting with a group of people from a number of communities in the county, and also as well Champaign, Savoy, regarding the Muhammad Aquifer situation and the impingement of gas. And there's a move that may or may not include the county board to provide more monitoring of this in the future, so that if this does happen, it doesn't go on so long with little or nothing being done, as a lot of notification did go out from peoples that was misunderstood, not understood, or shelved. And so there's more to come on that, but it was a very interesting meeting, and all, I guess there's 17 different parties involved. We're all in favor of doing something. It appears right now that there's maybe already some overlap in some of the goals, and so we've got some sorting out to do, but there's yet more to come on that, and I think that there's a lot of interest in it, and I think we share that interest with the cities and the rest of the Muhammad Aquifer people.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Anything else? Seeing none, we will then move on to line 7 for information only. We have A, an update on the residential electronics collection 2017 and 2018 events. And Susan, please.
Good evening. Today, I received the final count for the collection on October 14th, and it turns out it was our third largest single collection, one-day collection, with the final tally in. So what I have provided you here in this short overview memo is a comparison of the May 20th event and October 14th event. And the one factor to be aware of for the May 20 event is that it was pouring rain throughout that event, and that probably impacted everything. So that's why the totals are a bit lower. Essentially, with the online registration system, we can actually accommodate more participants than we could have without it. So that's really something to continue using should the county continue to have one-day collection of events for anything. Just recommend online registration. So the figures are here. There's a lot of interest in looking at what the percentage of televisions are in these collections, because cathode ray tubes are still coming in quite strong, near 60%. But the LCD televisions are a growing kind of commodity coming through on these collections. So as the cathode ray tube TVs decrease in quantity, the LCDs will increase over the next few years, very likely. Also, then I gave you information about the 2 dates that we are planning for the remaining 2018 2 collections of this type. May 19th, 2018, and Saturday, October 13th, 2018. These are tentatively planned pending county board approval.
Thank you, Ms. Monty. Ms. Petrie?
Susan, thank you again for all of the work and success and organization. I acknowledge it takes a lot of your time, and your success rate is terrific. I'm interested to see, as you come back to us with subsequent recycling events to see if, in fact, the success of the preceding ones is causing a decline in the amount that is then brought up in subsequent ones. Boy, yeah, help me, everybody, on that word, right? Because maybe that people are getting into the habit of it and really taking advantage of it and cleaning out things that have been hanging around. It may be a little too difficult to make a concrete conclusion on it, but it'll be interesting to see if the curve does go downward or if the only downward time was really related to the weather, as you have pointed out. Thanks again.
Further questions or discussion? Mr. Weibel?
Yeah, Susan, thank you again for your hard work. One thing I think you might want to perhaps put on your calendar and announce next year, there's going to be a hazardous waste collection in DeWitt County sometime next summer. I'm not sure. They just posted it on their website. I realize it's a ways away from Champaign County, but I believe they're open to anybody, and they don't come around into this area that often.
Do you mind if I ask if you saw that on the IEPA website? Did they announce their spring collection sites?
I think that was part of the list, actually. It's for 2018.
Oh, wow. I'll have to take a look at that. I can't
That was the closest one to Champaign County.
I'm a little disappointed that you did not see Champaign County on that list because we expected to be on that list, or we're hoping.
I know you talked about it, but
Yeah, okay,
so-
thank you.
Mr. King?
I echo great work. Two questions. First, would it be possible, and maybe you already sort of looked at this, to possibly do a recycling site in Champaign and then one in another location in the county? The first question, yeah.
Okay, well, this coming Thursday, we're going to have a study session, informal study session for staff, people, and practitioners at our next sustainability practitioners meeting to review all of the options before us for the program year 2019 under the new law. Okay. So we're going to be looking at pros and cons. That law entitles Champaign County to at least one permanent collection facility without paying for the facility itself or the operation of the facility, but the state will and manufacturers will fund the collection and processing of the materials collected. So it's probably some sort of cost savings in that regard. Okay. So we're going to be studying all options before us.
Okay. And then my second question was, so based on the size of our collection or what you're actually getting, how does that, have you looked at any national or even state trends to see how comparable is our pickup based on what we're doing to maybe other areas that are doing something similar?
Well, the state of Illinois is sort of it varies by region as to what's happening with regard to electronics collections. And it's been in a state of crisis for the past 2 years and is slowly recovering somewhat. And now, one additional factor with the new law is that Best Buy can accept and charge, retailers can charge for collection of recycled TVs. So they have started to do that at $25 per television with a limit of 2 televisions. Got it. For example, that's one change. Mm-hmm. So I cannot answer your question about statewide or national trends right now, but I will keep that in mind and try to give you an idea about that. I expect to be coming back either in December or January with a proposal about what we can want to consider for the program year 2019, because we would need to opt in by March 1st of 2018.
Got it. And in that proposal, will you be looking at what potential, could you expand the gamut of what you accept now through that proposal, or yes, can you expand what you accept now based on what you've seen?
Yeah, I don't have the legislation before me. I believe there's similar limits. I think it's 7 items per participant. I don't know if there's a limit on TVs per each participating incident, but yeah, I'll keep in mind that type of question.
Thank you.
Ms. Petrie?
Wes, could you mention about the buyback on use TVs. I wasn't aware that that had come into play. So how is the public being informed that this is now an option? Because we were in a dry period where that was not being allowed.
I believe that is prominently on at least the cities of Champaign and Urbana's website. I don't know if I updated the county website yet. They just started doing that this October, Best Buy. So I need to do that, update the county's website. I need to update the brochure that I have on the counters. So, yeah.
And then does Best Buy put it on their website also? I realize you have no control over their website, but I'm just curious.
It's deeply embedded.
Oh, yes, it's like finding the 800 phone number to call them, right?
If you follow, if you Google, like, for example, Best Buy Electronics Recycling, you'll get to a page that's a national page, and then you look up the statewide programs.
Oh, and every citizen would know to use that train of thought, okay.
Yeah, the only time you'd hear it is if you bought a TV and you had it delivered, they would offer, is really the only time that they offer that.
Further discussion? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Monty, and we will come right back to you for B, the update on the Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force.
Okay, I here in this brief memo point to the Public Act that contains this legislation about the formation of the Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force and its goals and its timeline. And task force members, approximately 20 plus in various categories, need to be appointed by the governor by November 25th, which is coming up quickly. So for the past 2 days, I've had calls into Scott Bennett's office, he was a sponsor of that bill, and I have since learned, I haven't heard back. It's been such a busy week for the legislators. But I do know that Senator Chapin Rose has been appointed to that task force. And I do know of the IEPA representative who will be sitting on that task force. But I would suggest that I email you all once I get access to a list. And the comment from the IEPA person, this is secondhand, is that he's concerned about the timeline. Because if you look at these goals, that's a pretty broad study that they have to conduct.
Thank you. Ms. Petrie?
I'd like to do two things. One is, you don't know this information, but when you do gather it, are citizens going to be part of the appointment to this task force? And then second, for you to capture a bit of the report that Mr. Marsh gave about that citizens meeting related to the gas in the aquifer wells, okay? Because I continue my concern that there's so many different entities that have some concerns and focus on the aquifer, and it seems that it would be nice if there was a little bit more coalescing rather than all these subsets that exist over, some are quite old, that have existed over time when working on the aquifer.
To respond to your inquiry about citizens being represented on the task force, not directly, there's not an open category of the 16 categories that indicates that. It seems like they're all stakeholder groups or representatives of various entities.
Susan, do you believe that that's what's holding up the appointment, or is it something else? Because it does feel like it's stretched across a lot of different segments, I guess.
I don't have an answer to that. I don't know what the delay is. It's just, sometimes it's disconcerting to call and ask about it, and nobody's heard of it, even, the task force. So be sure to email you once I do get that information.
I had Mr. Marsh next, and then Ms. Furtado.
Just first a comment, the recent meeting we went to was a meeting of municipalities, so Fisher and all of the local and county municipalities. I do believe that Chapin understands that there's a whole bunch of different things happening. There's some municipalities and counties that actually have their own, and he understands that picture, but is still not sure how to sort it out. So he was trying to collect that data. The question I had for you is have they sorted out the issue of the Muhammad Aquifer versus the other aquifers in the state, and how they're going to address them in the same manner? Have they talked anything about, have you heard anything about that issue?
No, I have not. I know there are many types of aquifers, but no.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit where we're stumbling, because other folks with similar concerns want the same type of treatment. I think it's one of the pieces slowing it down, as I understand from another one of our representatives at the meeting. So I'm not sure. So you have not?
No, haven't heard of that, but we'll keep an ear open for it.
Go ahead, Ms. Furtado.
My question is on the 16 groups, number 14 was 7 members representing local government bodies located over the Muhammad Aquifer. Do we count in that, and have they gotten somebody from our local government group yet?
Okay, I know one other fact that I did not share with you yet, and that is that the Muhammad Aquifer Advocacy Alliance has made a recommendation of these for Category 14 or other categories, probably including Category 14, to the governor's office, and they haven't heard back either.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion. Ms. Petrie.
That underlines my concern about so many different groups. And there's the consortium, there's the groups here, there's this new group. And they really, I know that I'm just putting this on the public record. There's not a lot you can do about it, Susan, but it really needs to have a coalescing.
If I might just give you my point of view, I think it's good that there are so many categories here that represent these different groups.
No, you misunderstand me. I'm talking about the established groups. Okay.
Anything else before we move on? Seeing none, we will then move on to C. We have an update on the ITB 2017-011 for demolition of 504 South Dodson Drive, Urbana. We've got some information at our desks, our seats. Mr. Hall?
Yeah, I gave every board member a copy of the bid tally sheet for 504 South Dodson Drive. That bid opening was November 7th. Low bid was Martin Brothers Logistics for $8,100. We were anticipating something in the range of $16,000, so that seems low. We compared the distribution of bids with what we received at 1101 Carroll for that demolition, and all I can say is if you compare the midpoint of these bids to the low, it's very close to what it was 1101 Carroll, so it's not unusual in that regard. Martin Brothers Logistics do a lot of these kinds of things. They certainly know what they're doing. However, the spread on this bid from $8,100 to $21,900 was wider than what we had seen on other bids. I can't explain that. To me, the $21,900 is definitely an outlier. We've talked to the Martin brothers, Harry Martin himself. He's comfortable with the bid. We've asked the state's attorney, if you'll notice, bid completion date, one of the bidders had actually said they would be through by the end of 2017, which probably would have been good to ask, but we didn't know what kind of a premium the county would pay. Apparently, it's about a $4,000 premium. But I'm sure Martin Brothers, if they can get it done by the end of the year, I'm sure they would, because that just means they'll get paid that much quicker. So I think it's a good result. It's on the agenda for next week's COW. And so that's the update.
Thank you. Ms. Petrie?
I do. I have a question or two on the bid framework. This has been hanging fire for such a long time, and was there any room for negotiation with Martin Brothers as to the bid completion date that it might happen? I mean, this is over 7 months away, and these folks have been extremely patient, and we have a lady who has come this evening, and just to let her know, I have physically driven through the neighborhood, so I do know what it looks like, and I can appreciate your concerns. So was there any room for negotiation on a completion date with the low bidder?
The invitation to bid doesn't outline anything like that, so there would be no expectation that that would happen. The recommendation I got from both the state's attorney and from county administration was just simply take the low bid and encourage them to, get done as quickly as possible. Nobody knows what, the weather's going to be like for the rest of this year. And again, I'm sure that Martin Brothers will get this done by the end of the year if it's possible, because they're going to get paid that much quicker.
I'll allow it since it is, if you come forward and speak into the microphone, since it is in your neighborhood.
Turn the mic on.
And if you, just push the button there, there you go, thanks.
Thank you. What will happen?
It went off, apparently. Maybe Tammy can, it's acted up a little. Tammy, there it went back on. It went back on there.
What will happen to this lot? Who owns this lot now?
Champaign County does.
And what will happen to this lot?
We will try to sell it as quickly as possible and make sure that we don't lose any money, but that's ultimately up to the county board, the price they would sell it for.
Okay. How can we keep current and know when this lot will be for sale or at what price?
Since you've asked that question, we'll let you know the minute it's for sale.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll post signs also, but don't know how long the signs will stay there.
There's no place in our neighborhood for our children to play. They play on the street. I keep dreaming that we could find a lot for a place for the children to play.
The county board was approached by a neighborhood organization with just that request a few years ago. They allowed the neighborhood organization to set up a park. That organization was active for a couple of years, and just this year, the county board paid $5,000 to have the playground equipment removed because it was an attractive nuisance and causing problems.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the same thing would happen in Scottswood, I know, but that's the risk when the county board tries to do something good.
I know.
Because the county does not have a park district. Yeah. We don't have someone to maintain those properties.
Okay.
So.
Great. Thank you.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't ask later.
Betty's asking, are you open to proposals to what could be done?
We'll pass anything like that along to the county board.
Thank you. Further discussion by the committee members or at Mr. King?
Real quick, sorry. I was just going to ask, and I understand if you cannot speak to this, but has Martin Brothers done this type of work for the county before? Or
Not for the county, but just in the past year, we've written 3 or 4 permits for them for demolition. We've recently started writing demolition permits. I mean, they've done this work for years, and they're great to work with.
Anyone else before we move on? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hall, for that update. Good discussion. We'll move on then to 8, items to be recommended to the county board. We have A, zoning case 883-FV-17, request by Tim Assire to authorize a variance from the Champaign County Special Flood Hazard Areas Ordinance to authorize the construction and use of 2 additions to a dwelling in which the top of the lowest floor of the addition is 8.5 inches above the base flood elevation instead of 1.0 feet above the base flood elevation on Lot 27 of the Meadows subdivision located at 2610 Appaloosa Lane, Mahomet. Is there such a motion? Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. Goss. Mr. Hall, do you want to speak to this?
I don't see Mr. Asire here tonight. We did call him, but it wasn't as timely a call as we would have liked, so I think probably he would have been here if he could. I can just say the ZBA, this was a unanimous recommendation. The county board authorized a flood variance for this entire dwelling back in 2005. These additions, if you looked at the map of the special flood hazard area, the largest addition just touches the special flood hazard area, but those standards still apply. And again, you know, it's not quite a foot above the base flood like it's supposed to be. That's why it needs the variance. It meets all the other requirements, and I don't think the county board should have any concerns about this establishing a pattern inconsistent with the National Flood Insurance Program. This pertains only to this property, and I know I don't have any concerns, and then the ZBA had no concerns about whether or not this should be approved.
Mr. Marsh.
You mentioned it wouldn't set a precedent. In what way would it not set a precedent? Where would we not have that concern, sir?
Well, the facts of this property are just very unique. The reason the house required a variance, it was originally built before the county had a flood ordinance, but even at that time, we had standards. The zoning administrator at that time rounded off the base flood elevation down rather than up. If you're going to round the base flood elevation, you really should round up. Bad direction from staff. And then it wasn't apparently, let's see, it actually was apparently constructed to a high, well, the other error the zoning administrator did at the time, he didn't require an as-built. Today, we require as-built elevation so that we immediately know if there's a problem. So this goes back to the 70s before we even had an ordinance, and I don't know of any other similar property, so I can say for a fact there is no pattern here.
Further questions, discussion? Ms. Furtado.
I just have a question of a point of just interest. When is the last time we've had a major flood here? Do you know?
Well,
you would know if anybody knows.
Champaign County is 1,000 square miles. The area along the Salt Fork had a major flood back in December of 2015.
Okay.
This area over on the Sangamon, I know they had a heck of a major flood back in '94, probably more than 100 year. I don't think it's gotten that bad since. Oh, it did?
Thank you.
Ms. Petrie.
Yeah. Well, I understand your explanation on not setting precedent. I think for the public record, I don't agree with it. That's number one. And then number two, I'm really interested that the ZBA unanimously approved this. And what I'm reading here is he seeks to construct 2 additions to the house, both at the same floor level of the rest of the house. A new variance cases require because the conditions will be less than 1 foot above the BFE. And he commented that he did not desire to have a bump in levels for different parts of the house. there are many ways that one could have done that without it being an inconvenience. And since I've just spent 2 years going through this, I'm quite sure that there are many ways that this could have been done. So at this point in time, I can't support this.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to take a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes, but will not be on consent. We will then move on to 8B, zoning case 884-AM-17, request by Kimberly Young, doing business as Quick Leasing Incorporated, 2 County Road, 1800 North, Seymour, Illinois, to amend the zoning map to change the zoning district designation from the I-1 Light Industry Zoning District to the B4 General Business Zoning District on a 2.99 acre parcel for the proposed expansion of a diesel truck maintenance facility with truck sales. The subject property is a 2.99 acre parcel that is part of the 14.99 acre parent tract, the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 24, Township 20 North, Range 8 East in Hensley Township, and commonly known as the proposed expansion site for Rush Truck Center, Champaign, 309 West Hensley Road, Champaign. Is there such a motion? Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. Goss. Mr. Hall, do you want to speak to this?
Well, this is a unique situation here. You know, the Rush Truck Center is already established. They do retail sales. They have already started building, as I understand it, the parking lot on this property. And in fact, they can use that property for their own equipment and employee parking, and it wouldn't need to be rezoned. But in fact, they want to be able to use it for their retail sales also. And so that's why it needs to be rezoned to B4. If you look at the land use map, you can see that there's already development to the east of this property. And so indeed, this is best prime farmland, but it was rezoned to I-1 back in the early 2000s. And so it hasn't been agriculture in it for a long time. It hasn't even been row crop agriculture for a long time. I think they've farmed it with hay. Yeah, alfalfa. And so they need to have it rezoned to use it as part of their truck sales. The ZBA found that it met all of your land resource management plan goals and policies. And I believe this was also a unanimous recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Discussion on this. Mr. Weibel?
Just one question. If they can use for retail, they mean they're mostly going to be parked vehicles on it? Would that be the retail use, best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, conceivably, if they needed to expand their building area on it, they could, but they have a huge building. I don't know if that's going to be necessary.
Ms. Petrie?
Well, I have trouble with this one also. I realize it's small. I realize part of the argument is that it hasn't been farmed much, but the soil score on this is 100. That's the top of the line. And my macro concern is, and some of it is past decisions, but decisions become very important when you look at something like this, and past decisions slice and dice things up. So one would say, gee whiz, what's the big deal? Go ahead and use up the very best farmland for parking. And again, I really can't support this because it's time that we really need to look at the land resource management plan. I've said that for a long time. Look at the slicing and dicing that goes on that creates these situations that where by default you end up approving things that really should never been in this kind of situation in the first place. So this one I can't support either. Thank you.
Mr. Goss.
Yeah, having worked this area for 25 years, this probably goes back to when they started the campground well before that, but I assure you that this has not been a row crop for a long time, because this map looks huge until you pull a baler in there, or you pull a piece of equipment in there. It's small, it was already chopped up once they put the campground in there, so it's already been chopped up.
Mr. King.
Oh, sorry. My question, and maybe they covered this in ZB, was, so is it just truck sales? Is there any kind of repair work that happens? So there will be a shop and to repair trucks on this and everything? Okay.
And I would just offer this. In the ag districts where the county board does have a concern about the use of best prime farmland, the maximum lot size on best prime farmland is 3 acres. So this is not simply a new lot, it's an expansion of an existing lot. I understand that. But if it were a new lot on best prime farmland, it would be completely conforming to maximum lot size.
Back to the MRV. You just underlined my argument.
Further discussion before we vote. Seeing no other questions or comments, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes, but again, will not be on consent. We then move on to C. We have the draft 5-year update to Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan. Is there a motion to approve this to go to the county board? Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. Marsh. Ms. Monty, do you want to say anything to begin with?
Only that since this was first submitted to ELUC 2 months ago or so, maybe 3 months, the City of Champaign has made an adjustment to their section to provide some updated information. That's it. It's on page 10, I believe. And they just talk about their update to their commercial recycling ordinance, and it's an update about implementation of its multifamily recycling program in 2010. So I should have had a strikeout copy to refer to here, but essentially they updated their information about their recycling programs in that section.
Further discussion on this? Thank you, Susan, for that update. Seeing no further questions, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We will then go on to D, the grant application to Illinois Housing Development Authority Abandoned Residential Property Municipality Relief Program. Is there a motion to approve going forward with this? Moved by Mr. Marsh, seconded by Ms. Petrie. Mr. Hall.
Okay, there's a memo at your desk tonight, plus there are a few copies of the complete application pack. Well, the application package minus the audit that has to be attached as an attachment. But you might want to peruse that complete application. The memo really just reviews the highlights, the fact that the request is for, okay, little background here. The minimum grant request is $20,000, and then up to $75,000 can be requested without providing any local match, Now, this grant operates on a reimbursement basis, so you have to spend the money before it's reimbursed. So the state will reimburse up to $75,000 with no local match. And then between 75 to $250,000, you can request something in that range, but then you have to match 1-for-1. And so we looked at our dangerous structures. We're not proposing at this grant that you plan to deal with all of your dangerous structures. We have selected the 5 most critical, one of which is the 504 South Dodson. You've already, hopefully the county board will approve that contract on the 21st. If we're approved with this grant, that would reimburse that $8,100. What we're recommending you do for those 5, we talked earlier on the bid about how there's a low bid and then there's an average of all the bids. And I looked at these 5 properties. I, first of all, estimated the cost using the middle of the bid, which for 504, the low bid was $8,100, the average bid was $14,000. So I looked at these other 4 properties using that average bid, $14,000, as a reference point, adjusted for the amount of building area and adjusted for inflation. And I came up with the total cost for these 5 demolitions could be $102,000. And so you subtract 75 from 102, 26,000. So the county would have to pay half of that 26,000. However, if we're extremely lucky and all the bids come in sort of based on the low bid, it's going to be less than $75,000. I don't think that's likely, but I also don't think it's likely that it would be 102. You don't have to use everything that you're approved for in the grant. There's no penalty, in other words. So we're recommending that you request the $86,000. That would let you take care of these 5 properties, provided that you actually have the funds to take care of these properties when you need to. Now, for example, the next property is at 202 Brady Lane, and based on the midpoint, the 202 Brady Lane is going to be about a $15,000 project. Okay, that's almost twice the $8,100. So in 2018, I'll be coming back at you asking for authority to proceed on that. Now, at the start of a fiscal year, we're going to have $6,800 in property clearance. If the grant is approved at some point in 2018, we'll get that $8,100 reimbursed. That actually could happen fairly early if the work is done early. Okay, I can imagine it's not going to be too difficult to have the funds to take care of that second property. But in 2018, we're proposing a third property, which will be $21,000 midpoint, or could be $12,000. Either way, I'm having trouble identifying where you're going to get the money for that second property. However, we do have the 3 properties that we're trying to sell. 2603 for the public, 2603 Campbell Drive, 1101 Carroll Avenue, and 504 South Dodson Drive. Now, we've gotten some calls on Carroll Avenue. We've gotten some interest and some suggested prices that would cover the county's costs. So maybe we'll be able to sell 1101 Carroll Avenue sometime in the first half of 2018. That could provide the money for that second demolition if things work out great. And I also want to let you know that your state's attorney's office has recently gotten a judgment against a violator for $10,000. I don't think we're going to see that $10,000. We have that judgment. We have other bigger violators that may have larger fines. And while, these fines are there for a reason, these are properties that, like these folks have been complaining about earlier. The best way to make people take care of their property is to give them a reason to take care of, i.e. fines. So there may be some fines in the works. I would not count on fines, but you need to know there may be some fines coming down the pike. We'll do our best to get these properties sold. We do have the interest in the one, the other two, I don't think, well, and we've had interest in a second property, but, you know, it's difficult to know what kind of luck we'll have. So we have these different sources of possible revenue. And again, we'll always come to you and ask. So this grant is not a panacea, but if we have a little bit of luck, it will reimburse you for the money you spend. And so anyhow, that's the recommendation from staff. And there's a lot of information here to digest, I know. So I'll stop talking. I just wanted to say one last thing. We're really only proposing to do 14 things with this grant, and it's summarized for you under scoring category 5. There are 14 activities listed. As each of these activities is done, we'll send in the proper form work requesting reimbursement. And, you know, we'll have to do that as quickly as possible in the hopes of getting that money reimbursed as quickly as possible. So it's only these 14 things. It should be easy enough to manage. This will obviously be a high priority if you apply and you get the grant. Meeting the terms of this grant will be the most important thing in our office. So that's all I have to say. If there are questions.
Ms. Petrie.
I have a number of questions. Are you able to obtain any past history of how long it takes before payment comes from the state? That's number one.
We asked 2 weeks ago for copies of successful applications, and we still haven't gotten them.
Okay, so there'll be a lag time in relationship to, even if we get the grant, as the gamble on a payment, so that money could roll forward to the next one.
I will make some calls to Champaign and Urbana. I would think I could provide that information for you before the county board takes action.
Okay, that would be great. Second, is this an annual program?
It's as the state has the funds.
Okay, so it's not something we could count on. I neglected to go back and look at the list. You used to provide the list of issue properties, and I didn't look at it. So you get 5 done, and you prioritize your choice of the 5. No question on that. But then how many remain that are still hanging fire?
On the second page.
Oh,
on the second page of the menu,
okay,
the
there it
memo,
is.
I reviewed that. Properties at, there's 3 properties when the committee last reviewed this in February. There are 3 properties that have recently been acquired by new owners, and there have been some things done, not as much as we would have hoped, but we still have hopes that those new owners will take care of those properties. 2 of these 5 properties that we're proposing to be included in the grant, 2 of those are actually new properties. They're in Foosland, but they're properties that we have recently gotten complaints on. And so, again, we could fit them into this grant. The only other remaining properties are those 4 properties. You may recall they're on Brownfield Road and Johnson Lane. They're contiguous. Together, I mean, it's going to cost a lot to clean those up. That landowner recently passed away without a will, so they're in probate. But there's a public administrator that's been appointed. The state's attorney's office has already been in touch with the public administrator. They're willing to keep the county updated on what happens, and they seem to be willing to, work with the county to try to get those properties cleaned up one way or another. So I think there's good reason to hold on those. There's good reason to hold on the other 3. And so the 5 that are proposed here are, in fact, your 5 most problematic properties.
All right, thanks for that reminder, since I didn't have time to go back and read the past information you provide for us. To me, that this is a no-brainer. These have been hanging fire for far too long, and when we get the grant, just because it's a rolling situation, we should be supportive of facilitating you all being able to handle these. Some of these are years old, and that's a lot of tolerance we've asked of the surrounding folks in each of these environments. So I appreciate your efforts and Susan's efforts on putting this grant together, and I certainly would be supportive of it, or will be supportive of it.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Jamie Hitt was also instrumental in this because
Okay, thank you, Jamie, also.
you can't put something like this together without having good information to work with. And so,
I'll give everybody credit who worked hard on this.
Further discussion. Mr. King.
Mr. Hall, thank you for also with the staff for putting this together. My question was just, so the properties that are listed, I know that you probably have some type of metric that you use to push these to this level, all of the ones here, but this isn't all of the dangerous properties, right? There's a few more that are sitting out there.
these are all the dangerous structures that we have in our files right now.
Okay, all right. And so
Now, that will grow. There will be new dangerous structures that, we become aware of. But
Okay.
this is, there's two here from Foosland. One of the ones that is being dealt with is in Penfield. So we've tried not to ignore any part of the county. The other thing is, this program only deals with residential properties. So, and single-family residential at that. This program would have been no help on Cherry Orchard or the Jones Building.
Ms. Furtado, and then Mr. Marsh.
Just to sort of echo what Patsy said, I just want to also commend you, especially when we're dealing with state funds, as we know they go up and down. So jumping on them, making hay when the sun shines is really important. So thank you for bringing this to us and taking the opportunity.
Mr. Marsh?
Is it correct to say that we have to the end of 19, calendar 19, to get this completed then? Okay, thank you.
Anything further on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll then move on to 9, the monthly reports. We have both A, the July 2017, and B, the August 2017 reports. Are there any questions, comments on those? Ms. Petrie noted that the prime farmland will go up, the converted. Anything else on this? Seeing none, we will receive and place those on file. Other business, I have nothing. Does anybody else have anything to add under other business? See none. Chair's report, I have nothing. Designation of items to be placed on the consent agenda. We have, 8C and 8D. And with that done, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. King. We're adjourned. Thank you.